Chapter 15, Section 3, and it's titled The American Legal System. And we're going to be learning about the Constitution of the United States and how it establishes and protects the individual's fundamental rights and liberties. And so some terms that we'll see. Number one, stare decisis. It's a Latin term for you. Who knew this was foreign language class, right? Stare decisis. And I'll explain more about that in a moment. Writ of habeas corpus, more Latin. Bill of attainder, ex post facto, due process, search warrant, double jeopardy, grand jury, plea bargaining, and bail. And I'll try to unpack all of those throughout the lesson. So here are the words: interpret, factor, presume. And I'll try to use them in a technical fashion so that you can understand how in a court of law, vocabulary is extremely important. And so, question: do you think that the United States provides too many protections for the accused? So as we learn about the rights of the accused, often the criticism is, are we just letting bad guys get away with it? You know, like one of your presentations yesterday was fascinating about Miranda v. Arizona, right? And what we learned was that the accused, in the case of Miranda v. Arizona, was actually a really bad person, right? He's a really bad guy. He had raped someone. And yet he got off on a technicality because he was able to demonstrate before the United States Supreme Court that he had not been made aware of his rights. And so in the U.S. Supreme Court case, Miranda v. Arizona, now officers have to read you their rights. Because there's a case where they didn't one time and a guy got away with rape as a result of it. Because of a technicality. We don't want that to happen, so we have to ensure that your rights are made aware. But of course that's led to the criticism that many people are getting away with some bad things because the burden of proof is on the prosecution. Okay, so we have, by virtue of being American citizens, basic legal rights and responsibilities. So as we've learned previously, we have both rights and responsibilities. And this is to ensure that our legal system works and that our legal rights are protected. That is the purpose of this. You know, once more, if an officer does not follow due process, that can be grounds for dismissal of a case. You know, when I was your age, O.J. Simpson was arrested for allegedly murdering his ex-wife and her boyfriend. Actually, it was his wife at the time, and then her boyfriend. She was sleeping with someone else. And he was arrested. And he was later acquitted, meaning the charges were dropped, and he got to go free. And then a resulting civil case went on for years, where in the civil case he was found guilty and actually sued for a monetary sum and had to pay that to the family. But in the criminal case, he was set free. And the details, oh my gosh, are so complicated. That case went on for over a year. But the hinge point in the case was when his defense attorney was able to find evidence that the prosecuting detective was racist, and that he had racist motives, and that he had been on record of making racial comments. And that was enough to raise just a shadow of a doubt, along with a couple of other demonstrations. For example, a glove that was worn by the murderer was brought to the case, and the defense attorney asked O.J. Simpson, under oath, to place the glove on his hand. And the glove didn't fit. And then he made the famous phrase, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. And O.J. went free. And so the question is, how did he get free? Well, you know, the civil case later showed that maybe he killed him, but he can't be tried twice for the same crime. So bottom line, since there was a shadow of a doubt, he went free. That's how our system works. Now, the United States Constitution establishes a separation of powers. It is the job of the legislative branch to make the laws, the executive branch to enforce the laws, and of course the judicial branch to interpret the laws. Now, what do you mean in terms of the judicial branch? Well, how do they interpret the laws? Well, they look at a couple of things, two to be exact. First, the laws that are written. We call those statutes. Secondly, the way the court has decided previous cases that are similar, and we call that precedent. And this is all based on a Latin term called stare decisis, and it means let the decision stand, which further means that it is the practice of using earlier judicial rulings as a basis for deciding cases. So precedent is extremely important in understanding the law. You know, if you choose to represent yourself in court, you need to not only understand the laws that relate to your specific case, but you also need to be aware of previous court decisions related to your specific case. So once more, the statutes and the precedents, which are all based on stare decisis. For example, if the court has previously interpreted that case in a similar way, and that helps you out, then you better be able to cite that case. Okay, so where do our basic legal rights come from? Most importantly, they come from Article 1 of the United States Constitution, as well as the constitutional amendments. So, of course, the rights of the accused are there in the Bill of Rights. Your right to remain silent, your right to be aware of what you're being accused of, your right to argue your case before a jury of your peers that you help decide. And then the details are laid out in Article 1 of the United States Constitution. So what is Article 1? Well, number one, it provides for a writ of habeas corpus. That is, a court order that requires police to bring a prisoner to court to explain why they are holding the person. And the biggest thing that you'll notice about this movie is the writ of habeas corpus is not present. He never gets to explain what he did because he never gets to know what he did. It also forbids bills of attainder. A bill of attainder is a law that punishes a person accused of a crime without a trial or a fair hearing in court. And in Kafka's work, The Trial, what we're about to see unfold is that he is being accused of a crime without a trial, and we're never going to really know what happens. And it's certainly frustrating and rather scary. It also protects us against ex post facto laws. This is another Latin term meaning after the fact. You know, and my favorite example is that as a parent, I'm sure I will be guilty of making the phrase, "New rule, don't do whatever you just did." That's ex post facto. Meaning, it is a law that would allow a person to be punished for an action that was not against the law when it was committed. You know, another way of looking at this is when your parents say, "You should have known better." Ergo, you're being punished. Or getting in trouble for something you weren't made aware of previously, or that you weren't aware it was even a policy. Again, that's ex post facto. These are all stated clearly in Article 1 of the United States Constitution. This is federal law, which transcends states. Now, which amendments are we talking about? Of course, the first 10, the Bill of Rights, deal very specifically with the rights of the accused. But also, the 14th Amendment was added, ensuring that these rights are guaranteed regardless of race, class, gender, ethnic origin, previous condition of servitude, etc. because the 14th Amendment is one of those amazing rules that guarantees that the law is to be protected for all equally. And then finally, due process. Due process are established procedures guaranteed by the Constitution that law enforcement have to follow if you are being accused of a crime. If due process is not followed as mandated in the 5th and 14th Amendments, you get to go free on a technicality. And so the United States Constitution focuses an awful lot on the rights and responsibilities of United States citizens. In fact, there was a group known as the Anti-Federalists. Thomas Jefferson was their main leader, who said, we will not sign the Constitution unless you add in the Bill of Rights, guaranteeing in writing rights that we have in protection from the government. Okay, so what are the rights of the accused? If you get in trouble, what can you do? What rights do you have? So, the United States Constitution details many of these rights. For example, if you are accused of a crime, you must, by law, be assumed innocent until you have been proven guilty. Once more, the burden of proof is on the accuser. You know, it is a violation of your rights for someone to tell you that you are in trouble and for you to deny it, and then for the person accusing you to say, prove it. You shouldn't have to prove your innocence. It goes the other way around. The accuser has to prove your guilt. Again, stated in the Constitution. Specifically, the 4th Amendment protects citizens against unreasonable searches and seizures. That means that if an officer approaches you and asks to see your possessions, you have the right to refuse. You have the right to say, I would prefer not to show you those things. And they cannot compel you by law. Again, an officer can come to your house, but unless you invite them in, they are not allowed in. It also gives Americans the right to be secure in their homes and in their property, to be safe from the government in their homes and their property. Your property is yours. It is sacred. It belongs to you. And the government cannot enter your property without your permission unless they have reasonable cause to believe that a crime is actively being committed. And if they have probable cause and you still refuse entry, they then have to get a search warrant. A search warrant is a court order signed by a judge which allows law enforcement officers to search a suspect's home or business and take specific items from the premise, even without the owner's permission. But only with the order of a judge may this be done, and the judge is accountable to the voters. And so if it is found out that the judge is issuing warrants in a fraudulent manner, the voters will hold him accountable, and there are grounds for impeachment of sitting judges. And so all this is done to protect the rights of the accused. Mapp v. Ohio is an important Supreme Court case in terms of precedents. It established the exclusionary rule. But next, I want to get into the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment guarantees that, quote, no person shall be compelled to be a witness against themselves. You cannot be made to tell on yourself. You can't. You can plead the Fifth, and you can remain silent from the time you are arrested until the time that your trial is completed. The case of Miranda v. Arizona interpreted the Fifth Amendment to say that unless you are made aware of these rights, the officer cannot legally arrest you. So you not only have the right to remain silent from the beginning to the end, but the officer must inform you of your right to remain silent from the beginning to the end. The Fifth Amendment also protects against double jeopardy. Double jeopardy means that O.J. can't go back to criminal court for the alleged murder of Nicole Brown Simpson. He's off the hook. A jury has ruled that he is not guilty. The judge has acquitted him, and he can never again be accused formally of that crime because of the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, which protects against double jeopardy, which means to put someone on a trial for a crime that they were previously acquitted of. This also establishes the right to a grand jury. That is a jury of your peers. A grand jury is a group of citizens that decide whether there is sufficient evidence to accuse someone of a crime. In traffic court, you go before a judge. The officer that issued the citation will be there, and the judge will be there. They hear your case and make a decision. However, if you're accused of something very serious, like murder or theft of large valued property, well, that's where we're talking. You need to lawyer up, and your lawyer is going to help you select a jury of your peers, because you want to make sure that you find folks that are about your age, that have no reason to have any bias against you, ideally people that don't know you. And again, you have the right to select those people because you are in big trouble, possibly. And you want to make sure that your case is going to be heard by people that are willing to hear your side of the story. 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment's purpose is to ensure that all residents of America who were born here or who have become citizens through the legal process are guaranteed equal protection under the law. Equal protection under the law, regardless of race, gender, religion, previous condition of servitude, etc., etc. Next is the Sixth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment establishes the right to legal counsel. This is extremely important. In fact, this was interpreted in Gideon v. Wainwright to say that if you cannot afford a lawyer, one is provided to you by the state. This also means that you must be informed of the nature and causes of the accusations against you, and you have the right to a speedy and public trial. That's another of the scary things in this movie that we're watching. The trial conducted, what you're about to see, is all handled in private. No one else knows except for poor Joseph K. and the judge presiding over his case. The impartial jury means that you have the right to select those jurors. And then finally, you have the right to question anyone who speaks against you. You have the right to cross-examine any witness. Now, what types of trials don't go to jury? Bench trials. Bench trials can be requested by the accused. Plea bargains can be requested by the accused. You can avoid trial by negotiating with the defense attorney. Let's say that one of you is accused of possessing a large amount of illegal narcotics. You got a trunk full of something sketchy. Well, let's say you're willing to turn on your dealer in exchange for a plea bargain. If you have a trunk full of narcotics, you're facing prison time, felony charges. It's going to be bad. I mean, you won't hold down a real job for the rest of your life. Like good luck getting a job at Arby's. And so, your life as you know it is going to change forever if you found with a trunk full of narcotics. Well, okay, all that goes on your record. Oh my gosh, it's going to be bad. Not to mention you might face 10 to 20. So what can you do? Well, the DA is going to come by your cell and is going to offer you a plea deal. And if you're willing to roll on the person that provided you with those substances, all charges might be dropped. And depending on the severity of the case, then they might even put you in witness protection. If you're bringing down somebody big that represents a huge ongoing case, then again, you might be entitled to a number of things that would keep you alive, because deal. Okay, the Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment outlaws cruel and unusual punishment. The punishment must fit the crime. And this has raised questions about the use of the death penalty. Is the death penalty cruel and unusual? And that's a rather controversial question. Some people are pro-death penalty, some people are against death penalty. But that brings up the case of Furman v. Georgia. In the case of Furman v. Georgia, the death penalty, as was then administered, was deemed unconstitutional. Once upon a time, if you were convicted and sentenced to death, they hung you. That was deemed cruel and unusual. They switched to an electric chair. I can't see how that's more humane, but it's pretty extreme if you've ever seen at least cinematic versions of it. And then that was deemed cruel and unusual. And the current method is lethal injection. And there are still ongoing cases disputing, claiming that is cruel and unusual. Now, the Eighth Amendment also protects against excessive bail. Bail is a sum of money that is used as a security deposit to ensure that an accused person returns for his or her trial. So, if you are accused of a hit and run, which is potentially a very serious charge, if you get in a car wreck and the wreck winds up killing someone, if it's deemed an accident, you could go free. But if you get in a car wreck and then you run, that's potentially a felony manslaughter. And you could be facing serious time. Now let's assume that you're caught. The judge has deemed you a flight risk because after all, you just fled the scene of a crime. And so they're going to set bail. Even in that case, the Eighth Amendment still protects you. They can't set the bail at just $1 million. They can't. Now, here's the exception. If the judge deems that you are not just a flight risk, but a risk to the safety of the community, or if you are just likely to never be seen again, then they may choose to deny bail. Okay.